Bitcoin has been in the news quite a bit lately, not just because of its value and the fact that Tesla will accept the cryptocurrency for its electric vehicles, but now Iran is turning to it. To chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, the Islamic nation is running to Bitcoin to what, evade sanctions and to help bolster their crumbling economy?
Yes, so this is a story we did at the foreign desk. It's interesting because I remember doing Bitcoin stories back in 2014, talking about how ISIS would use Bitcoin in the selling and transferring of artifacts that they would plunder from Iraq and Syria. And now, fast forward, well, it's in the news again, but it's on the radars of those trying to not have an economic footprint. So the Iran regime, for example, very much so would like to purchase things globally and work around the sanctions. Obviously, a central bank is not working or not; they're not allowed to receive payments. So this is a perfect way to evade the sanctions. And the mining is a great business. I had no idea before we did this piece, but Iran is now one of the top miners in the world for Bitcoin as well. So they've found out a way not only to make it benefit them economically, but twofold in mining as well.
Oh, that's incredible. Let's bring it closer to home for just a moment here. A voice of American conservatism has passed away. Popular radio and TV host Rush Limbaugh passed away at the age of 70, Lisa. It's not that old at all. Now, he had a lot of supporters, but at the same time, he could be a little controversial with many North Americans.
Yes. The most beautiful thing is that we always say people get all the honor after they pass. And someone of his caliber, um, fortunately, was honored by President Trump. He was given the Presidential Medal of Honor, which was placed upon him by the First Lady. I think he had said that that was the best moment and most, honorable moment of his life. And how beautiful that he was able to receive this honor before his passing, and obviously all of the wonderful things that people on the right are saying about him. Unfortunately, on the left, they're not as well behaved. I've always found it to be in such poor taste to talk about the dead. But the media can't help themselves. The headlines are just egregious, calling him, all sorts of things that I don't even want to repeat, but you could imagine. But for many who listened to him, for many who saw him as the pioneer of right-wing talk radio, television, media, just paving the way for the political party of the Republicans. I think this was a very big loss, and he's seen as someone whose shoes won't be filled ever again.
Lisa, after 4 weeks of waiting, Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu finally received a coveted call from U.S. President Joe Biden. Do we know yet what they really talked about?
You know how we have some idea, but I will just say that the 4 weeks of silence spoke much louder than anything that was talked about on that phone call. This was not accidental. 4 weeks is a long time, particularly when you look at all the executive orders, when you look at all of the other phone calls made to adversaries. I mean, Biden spoke to the head of China and Russia before he talked to our biggest ally in the Middle East, Bibi Netanyahu. Obviously, this is reminiscent of the relationship that President Obama had with Bibi Netanyahu, and a real about face from the relationship that President Trump had with Bibi Netanyahu. So it was no accident that it took this long to make the call. Both Bibi was waiting. Many were just, in anticipation of when will he make the call, and why hasn't he made the call? As to the contents of the call, they allegedly spoke about the pandemic, the peace plan going forward, the relationship between the two nations. And, it was a very warm conversation. That's what Bibi Netanyahu reported. And hopefully we'll see a continuation of a more than decent relationship between the two countries going forward.
There are reports surfacing that the country of Qatar is trying to facilitate dialogue between the United States and Iran, advocating that both sides need to return to the 2015 nuclear deal to help reduce tensions.
Isn't that nice of them? Qatar is known to be this playing both sides in the Middle East, meaning they have tried to side with the Sunnis and as well the Shiites, and that just doesn't work. particularly when you're talking about siding with the Iranian regime, which is not well regarded in the Sunni circle in the region. And now that the United States, with President Biden at its helm, will potentially return to a deal, there's no way, and President Biden has said this, that we'd go back to a 2015 deal. 2015 allowed for sunset clauses. It put us at the position that we're at right now, which is a 1 yard line position from having a nuclear weapon. Now, Qatar wants to be relevant the way that Oman was relevant during the 2015 nuclear talks. And it's all nice and dandy, but we have to look at the facts. And a lot has happened since 2015. And as much as the Biden administration is showing a lot of eagerness to get back into the deal, President Biden has also said that we will not drop the sanctions before we see some sort of action and collaboration by the Iranian regime to reduce their uranium enrichment before we go any further. So there's a lot of twists and turns, a lot of contradictions within the Biden administration with regards to how we will move forward. It looks like we unfortunately will move forward into some sort of deal, but hopefully this will have a lot of more preconditions than the previous one, and Qatar will just have to sit by on the sidelines, I think, for this one.
The U.S. has charged 3 North Koreans with the theft of more than $1.3 billion in a scheme involving banks and various businesses, Lisa, and the 3 are not yet in custody.
Yeah, this is a crazy story when you look at the details. These individuals have been involved in cyber hacks before. They are well known, and as you said, they're not in custody just yet. But imagine having that kind of apparatus where you're able to easily and stealthily steal $1.3 billion. They were involved in a hack that involved Sony before and the UK health ministry. So they're well known. And as one expert put it, North Korea has turned into basically this like surveillance state with a flag. So they have eyes all across the world. They have apparatuses set up all across the world, and yet they are not playing by the rules. They did not warrant relations with the U.S. the way that Donald Trump was hoping they would, and they continue to be the rogue nation that they are.
It almost sounds like a Hollywood script, doesn't it? 1.3 billion, not million, but $1 billion. Wow.
Crazy story.
Social media giant Facebook has blocked Australian users from sharing or viewing news content on its platform, Lisa. Several government health and emergency pages were also blocked, and it all has to do with a new law down under.
Yeah, so Australians are saying we're going to call the shots against big tech. They'll have to pay for the news content that they put on their sites. They can't just put free news up on their social media platform, and we're going to block them if they refuse to. So that's exactly what happened. So Australians woke up to a very different interface on Facebook. This is upsetting for a lot of people, particularly baby boomers, a lot of whom get their news, unfortunately, get their news from social media platforms like Facebook. And that's where they share their news. That's where they get their news. And unfortunately, they will not be able to do that on Facebook, at least until we figure something out.
Any chance the same law would be coming to the United States?
We haven't heard anything, but we do know that there are certain groups that are targeting big tech. Right now, the governing party isn't one of those groups because it's been benefiting them. The latest I've heard about big tech censorship is actually now they're going to be flagging posts that talk about global warming. Remember, they used to flag posts, and they still continue to flag posts whether it's about COVID because they want to stop misinformation or from it becoming political, which it already had been at that point, and also about election interference or election fraud. Any posts about those two topics would always be flagged with some sort of disclaimer. Now we're hearing that any posts that talk about global warming will also be fact-checked, or there will be a disclaimer. So we're actually letting big tech get away with more, not less. I don't know if we're going to be going the way of Australia anytime soon here.
The U.S. government is going to be delivering $200 million to the World Health Organization, and this is to fulfill contributions which were delayed under the Trump administration. Tell me more about that.
Hal, it's awful. Donald Trump was very much against giving money to these acronym organizations that were just do nothing. This he withdrew from the WHO, the World Health Organization, particularly when they were not being as helpful, or he deemed them not as helpful during the beginnings of the COVID pandemic. But Hal, I have even worse news for you. Today, news broke that the Biden administration has okayed taxpayer money, financial contributions to the Wuhan Virology Lab through the end of 2024.
Wow.
Yes, I read this and I had to go verify it, and I did. It's tremendous to see that the WHO made their way over to Wuhan, too little, too late. But when they did make their way over about a month ago, it was said that we had a lovely trip, but we didn't find anything. Later, it was revealed that well, they weren't exactly being transparent. That's why we aborted the mission and we came home.
The
Fine.
epicenter of the virus, and they couldn't find anything.
Exactly. Now we're giving money, U.S. taxpayer money, to that lab in order to be what? Again, non-transparent. In order to do what? What are we paying them for? What are we getting in return? I think this administration has to go back to the playground where you give up your cookies, but you get a bag of chips. You can't just give up stuff for free and not get anything in return. It's a very basic concept, particularly with diplomacy. So yes, that's the latest. We're giving money to the WHO and to the Wuhan lab till further notice.
We live in a wild, wild world right now. Now, instead of millions of dollars, let's talk about the millions of people in Texas impacted by the power outages that were caused as a result by the nasty storms. Why did the power grid fail?
How this is such a sad story when you see these families that are affected, those who even perished in fires because they have their fire places running throughout the night, or accidents are happening with grills and things like that people are bringing into their homes to stay warm. This electric grid is meant to work to a certain level for the summers and the winters in Texas. As you know, Texas's weather is pretty predictable, hasn't been this cold in a very long time. These are record lows and for an extended period of time. So this grid buckled basically under the demand of so many people turning on the heat that it couldn't sustain. And now people are questioning the grid. They're questioning Texas and how this even happened. Obviously, again, the weather patterns in that state have been pretty consistent. That's why the grid was functioning to a certain level. And now, when we do have this outlier season, that this happened.
Lawsuits have been launched across North America in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, and now an investigation has been launched involving nursing home deaths in New York.
Oh gosh, this is another very, very sad story. For those following this story, New York was the first place hit in the United States, very, very, very harshly with the COVID-19 virus. And it, of course, hit the nursing homes very, very badly and very harshly. And when the people living in these nursing homes were transferred to hospitals, that's when the quarantine began. Governor Cuomo of New York said that they can go back to the nursing homes after a certain period of time. And that's when many, many more of these deaths occurred. Now, in the meantime, over the last year or so, Governor Cuomo went on with his briefings. He got an Emmy, a Daytime Emmy Award for giving these briefings. He wrote a book on how well he handled the pandemic. But just recently, one of his aides leaked to the media that they were covering up so much of this information in order to diminish the numbers of the casualties that they had at these nursing homes. She should be given a security around the clock. I would be fearful for my life if I were her. But this is awful. The truth has to come out. His Emmy has to be taken away from him. His book should be thrown into those fireplaces that we just spoke about. But this is horrific. This is horrific. And you know, if Donald Trump brought anything to the world, love him or hate him, it should be that politicians should not come from the same bubble, that they shouldn't repeat these mistakes. They shouldn't be so fraudulent in order to get reelected, in order to, it's just awful, awful. This is a repetition of a political family just getting their political points, and people's lives are at stake. So a lot of families are very upset. And I know Janice Dean of Fox News, who's the meteorologist over there, her husband, both of his parents perished, and she has been leading the charge to a certain extent. And now she has the help of law enforcement and many others investigating alongside with her.
Have to keep so many of those families in prayers, so many families impacted by this terrible virus and the pandemic. U.S. political reporter and our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thank you, Lisa.
My pleasure.